On the morning of February 28, 1983, a shocking discovery in an abandoned building in St. Louis, Missouri, would leave investigators searching for answers that, decades later, still remain out of reach. Inside the vacant property, police found the body of a young African-American girl believed to be between 8 and 11 years old. She had never been reported missing under a name investigators could connect to her. And despite extensive efforts by law enforcement, forensic experts, and members of the public, her identity has never been confirmed. Today, she is remembered as St. Louis Jane Doe, one of the most heartbreaking. More than 40 years have passed since that cold winter morning, yet the mystery continues to challenge investigators and remind the nation of the importance of identifying every victim and pursuing justice regardless of how much time has passed. This documentary explores the known facts surrounding the case, the investigation that followed, and the enduring hope that advances in forensic science may one day restore this young girl's name. Before we begin, it's important to remember that behind every case file is a real child whose life was cut tragically short. Our purpose is to examine the evidence respectfully, separate verified facts from speculation. If you appreciate respectful true crime documentaries focused on facts and unsolved investigations, consider subscribing and sharing this video so that stories like this continue to reach new audiences. In late February of 1983, St. Louis was experiencing the final stretch of winter. Like many large American cities during that period, parts of the city were dealing with abandoned buildings, economic challenges, and neighborhoods struggling with disinvestment. Investigators were called to an empty apartment building after the body of a young girl was discovered inside. From the beginning, detectives recognized that the case would be exceptionally difficult. The child carried no identification, no personal belongings that could establish who she was, and no immediate clues pointing to family members or acquaintances. Without a confirmed identity, investigators faced the first and perhaps greatest obstacle in solving any homicide investigation. They did not know who the victim was. Establishing identity is often the first step toward reconstructing a person's final days, identifying associates, and determining where investigators should focus their attention. In this case, that critical first step proved extraordinarily challenging. Authorities carefully documented the scene and began collecting every piece of physical evidence that might eventually help identify the child or reveal who was responsible for her death. Investigators interviewed nearby residents, searched missing person records, distributed information to surrounding jurisdictions, and worked with forensic specialists to develop a profile of the victim. They estimated that she was an African-American girl between 8 and 11 years old. Descriptions of her physical characteristics were circulated nationally through law enforcement channels in the hope that someone would recognize her. At the time, however, information sharing between agencies depended largely on telephone calls, mailed reports, printed bulletins, and local news coverage. The sophisticated national databases, digital records, and rapid communication tools that investigators rely on today simply did not exist. As a result, connecting unidentified remains with missing children from other cities or states could take months or even years. The investigation soon expanded beyond St. Louis as detectives considered the possibility that the child might not have been from the immediate area. Law enforcement agencies across Missouri and neighboring states reviewed missing child reports, looking for potential matches. Detectives compared ages, physical descriptions, and timelines, hoping that one report would provide the breakthrough they desperately needed. Numerous possibilities were examined, but none could be conclusively confirmed. Every promising lead required painstaking of available records and consultation with forensic experts. Unfortunately, each avenue eventually reached a dead end. As weeks turned into months, there was nothing new. The absence of a confirmed identity made it increasingly difficult to generate new investigative leads. Forensic specialists conducted detailed examinations. Forensic specialists methodically documented available identifying details, following established procedures designed to support future investigative efforts and other observable features that could later be compared with missing person reports. Such work is often painstaking and requires collaboration between medical examiners, forensic anthropologists, odontologists, and investigators. Although forensic science in the early 1980s had advanced significantly compared with previous decades, many of the DNA technologies that are now considered routine either did not yet exist or were still in the earliest stages of development. Consequently, investigators had to rely heavily on traditional investigative methods, eyewitness accounts, and physical evidence. The case attracted local media attention, and newspapers reported on the unidentified child in the hope that someone would recognize the description and contact authorities. Community members expressed shock that a young girl could remain unidentified. Tips began arriving from members of the public, some offering possible names, others suggesting missing children from neighboring communities. Detectives evaluated each lead carefully. In homicide investigations, even information that appears insignificant can sometimes become the key to solving a case. Officers understood that dismissing a seemingly minor detail could mean overlooking the one clue capable of identifying the victim or locating a suspect. Nevertheless, despite extensive follow-up, none of the early tips produced a confirmed identification. As time passed, investigators began facing another challenge common to long-term unsolved cases: memories fade. Witnesses move away, and physical evidence can only answer questions if investigators know how to interpret it. Detectives carefully preserve the evidence collected in the hope that future scientific advances might reveal information unavailable at the time. This decision would prove critically important because many cold cases across the United States have later been solved. Through techniques that were unimaginable when the investigations first began, the unidentified child became known publicly as, quote, St. Louis Jane Doe, a designation used by law enforcement when a victim's true identity remains unknown. While the nickname allowed investigators and the media to reference the case, many advocates have pointed out that it also serves as a painful reminder that a real child's name, family history, and personal story remain lost. Organizations dedicated to identifying unidentified persons have continued highlighting the case for decades, believing that renewed public attention could eventually generate the information needed to restore her identity. Throughout the 1980s, investigators repeatedly revisited. Detectives understood that some missing children are never formally reported, while others may have been reported under circumstances that complicated cross-jurisdictional comparisons. Families relocate, records become incomplete, and agencies may use different documentation systems. Every one of these factors can hinder an investigation. Despite these obstacles, law enforcement continued reviewing available records whenever new information emerged or improvements in record-keeping allowed additional comparisons. The case also underscored broader issues affecting unidentified person investigations throughout the United States. Before the widespread adoption of computerized databases, many jurisdictions maintained paper files that were difficult to compare efficiently with records from other states. Investigators often depended on mailed photographs, fingerprint cards, and written descriptions. Today, digital databases, forensic imaging, and DNA technology have dramatically improved the ability to compare missing persons with unidentified remains. But in 1983, those resources were unavailable. Understanding this historical context helps explain why some cases remained unsolved for decades, despite determined investigative efforts. Community advocates and victim identification organizations have never allowed the case to disappear completely from public attention. Over the years, the story has appeared in documentaries, newspaper retrospectives, podcasts, and educational discussions about cold case investigations. Each renewed examination has had the same goal: encouraging someone with knowledge to come forward. Encouraging someone with forgotten knowledge. Cold cases are sometimes solved because a witness finally feels ready to speak, a family recognizes a detail after many years, or advances in forensic science reveal information hidden within evidence preserved decades earlier. Even without a confirmed identity, investigators have consistently emphasized that this child deserves to be remembered, not simply as an unsolved mystery, but as a victim whose life mattered. Every unidentified child represents a family history interrupted, unanswered questions, and a community still waiting for justice. The continuing effort to identify St. Louis Jane Doe reflects a broader commitment shared by forensic scientists, detectives, victim advocates, and volunteers across the United States. Every victim deserves a name, every family deserves answers, and every investigation deserves to benefit from the best science available. As the years continued to pass, the investigation entered, but cold does not mean forgotten. Evidence remained preserved, files remained available for review, and investigators continued hoping that future scientific breakthroughs would succeed where earlier methods could not. Advances in DNA analysis, forensic genealogy, and facial reconstruction and national cold case investigations across America. Those developments would offer new possibilities for identifying victims once believed impossible to name. In the next part of this documentary, we'll explore how modern forensic science has reshaped the search for St. Louis Jane Doe's identity, the renewed investigative efforts undertaken in recent decades, the role of DNA technology in public awareness, and why many experts believe that even after more than 4 decades, this case still has a genuine chance of being solved. As the investigation entered its 2nd decade, many observers feared that the cold cases often become increasingly difficult to solve as years pass. Witnesses relocate or pass away, memories become less reliable, and evidence can deteriorate if it has not been properly preserved. Yet investigators and forensic specialists knew that one important advantage remained on their side. Science was evolving at an extraordinary pace. Throughout the late 1980s and into the 1990s, forensic DNA analysis transformed criminal cases that had once relied almost entirely on eyewitness testimony and circumstantial evidence suddenly had access to powerful scientific tools capable of identifying victims and suspects with remarkable accuracy. Although these advances arrived after the St. Louis Jane Doe investigation had begun, they offered investigators renewed hope of that preserved evidence might someday provide answers unavailable in 1983. One of the greatest challenges in unidentified person investigations before determining exactly who was responsible. Unlike many homicide investigations, detectives in this case were working without a confirmed name, family history, school records, medical records, or even a verified hometown. Every missing child report had to be compared carefully with the available. Investigators were able to expand these comparisons beyond local jurisdictions. Information could now be shared more efficiently between police departments, state agencies, and federal organizations. Systems designed to connect missing person reports with unidentified remains became valuable resources, allowing investigators to revisit cases that had once seemed impossible to solve. Forensic experts also continued refining physical examination. Improvements in forensic anthropology, odontology, and facial approximation techniques provided investigators with additional ways to estimate age and reconstruct what an unidentified person may have looked like during life. While no reconstruction can guarantee recognition, these tools often generate renewed public interest and occasionally lead to valuable tips from people who remember seeing or knowing someone matching the reconstructed appearance. Public awareness remains one of the most powerful investigative tools available. Many cold cases have been solved because someone recognized a photograph, remembered a conversation, or finally came forward after decades of silence. Over the years, several organizations dedicated to missing and unidentified persons helped. Their goal has never been to sensationalize the tragedy, but to restore the child's identity and provide investigators with new opportunities for progress. These organizations work alongside law enforcement by maintaining searchable databases, distributing age-progressed images where appropriate, and encouraging families of missing children to submit DNA samples for comparison. The development of national DNA databases has significantly increased the chances of identifying previously unknown victims, even in cases that remained unsolved for generations. The emergence of forensic genealogy, this relatively new investigative technique, has gained national attention after helping solve numerous decades-old cold cases across the United States. Instead of relying solely on direct DNA matches already stored in law enforcement databases, forensic genealogy can identify distant biological relatives, allowing investigators to construct family trees and gradually narrow the search for a person's identity. While every case presents unique legal, ethical, and scientific challenges, this technology has already restored names to many unidentified victims who had remained anonymous for decades. Experts believe that unidentified child cases such as St. Louis Jane Doe may also benefit from these continuing advances, provided that suitable DNA samples and genealogical comparisons are available. The success of forensic genealogy and other investigations has renewed optimism among detectives and victim advocates. Cases once considered impossible have been solved after 40, 50, or even 60 years. Those successes remind investigators that scientific methods continue improving, laboratory techniques become increasingly sensitive, and databases expand every year. Evidence that could not be interpreted decades ago may now reveal entirely new investigative leads. This reality has transformed the philosophy surrounding cold cases. Rather than viewing them as permanently unsolved, many agencies now treat them as investigations waiting for technology to catch up. Despite these advances, identifying St. Louis investigators must distinguish between verified facts and speculation while avoiding conclusions unsupported by evidence. Over the years, numerous theories have circulated online regarding the child's identity and the circumstances surrounding her death. Some have attracted considerable public attention, while others have been repeated so frequently that they are sometimes mistaken for established facts. Responsible investigators evaluate every credible lead carefully, but they also recognize that unsupported rumors can divert valuable resources away from productive investigative work. Separating fact from speculation remains essential in any long-running investigation. The case also highlights an important issue affecting missing children nationwide. Not every missing child enters public awareness immediately. Families may experience barriers when reporting disappearances, records may become incomplete, or circumstances surrounding a child's absence may complicate early investigations. In some situations, historical record-keeping practices. Today, greater cooperation among law enforcement agencies, child protection organizations, and forensic specialists has improved these processes considerably, reducing the likelihood that unidentified victims remain disconnected from missing person reports for extended periods. For the investigators who have inherited this case over multiple generations, the mission remains remarkably consistent. Every new detective assigned to the file reviews previous reports, examines preserved evidence, studies forensic findings, and considers whether emerging technologies could provide new answers. Cold case investigations rarely progress in a straight line. Months or years may pass without significant developments before a single discovery changes the entire direction of the investigation. Patience, persistence, and careful documentation are essential qualities for detectives working these cases. The story of St. Louis Jane Doe is also a reminder of the dedication whose work often receives little public attention. Laboratory specialists, anthropologists, examining evidence with extraordinary precision. Although their work may not generate headlines, it often forms the foundation upon which future investigative breakthroughs are built. Every carefully preserved sample, every documented observation, and every updated laboratory technique increases the possibility that For many Americans, the case has become symbolic of the broader effort to identify every unknown victim. Across the country, thousands, each representing an individual whose family may still be searching for answers. Organizations, volunteers, and law enforcement agencies continue collaborating to reduce that number through public outreach, technological innovation, and scientific research. Every successful identification demonstrates that even decades-old mystery, when evidence is preserved and investigative efforts continue. Although no one can predict when the breakthrough will occur, history offers reasons for optimism. Numerous unidentified victims have regained their names after decades of anonymity because detectives refuse to abandon the investigation. Likewise, many homicide cases once considered unsolvable have ultimately resulted in arrests through DNA evidence, genealogical research, or long-forgotten witness testimony. These examples illustrate why cold case units continue investing time and resources into investigations that began generations earlier. As viewers, we are reminded that true crime stories are ultimately about real people rather than mysteries alone. Behind every investigative file is a life that mattered, loved ones who deserve answers, and a community that benefits when justice is pursued with integrity. The purpose of revisiting cases like St. Louis Jane Doe is not simply to recount an unsolved crime, but to support continued awareness, encourage responsible public engagement, and recognize the remarkable work of investigators striving to restore a child's identity. More than 40 years after that tragic discovery in St. Louis, detectives continue preserving evidence, monitoring technological developments, and encouraging anyone with credible information to contact the appropriate law enforcement agency. Each scientific breakthrough, each database improvement, and each renewed public discussion creates another opportunity for progress. While the timeline remains uncertain, the commitment to identifying this young girl has never disappeared. If there is one enduring lesson from this investigation, it is that no victim should ever be forgotten simply because time has passed. Justice is not measured only by arrests or convictions. It is also measured by the determination to restore a person's name, acknowledge their humanity, and ensure their story is remembered with dignity. The unidentified child known as St. Louis Jane Doe deserves that commitment, and so do countless other unidentified victims. Thank you for watching this documentary. If you found this factual examination informative, consider sharing it to help raise awareness about unidentified person cases and the importance of continued forensic research. Public awareness has played a role in solving many cold cases, and St. Louis Jane Doe will no longer be known by a placeholder name, but by the identity she always deserved.